our first video in this series. And so we're very, very excited to kick this off. I'm going to go ahead while Rachel's getting her final things set up here. I'm going to go ahead and just say thank you for tuning in. This is our first video in this series, Cult Recovery Not Canceled, which is really exciting for us. We wanted to still provide resources, recovery resources for people during this really trying, awful, sad time in the world. A lot of us are feeling really cooped up. Perhaps you're quarantined, perhaps you're practicing safe social distancing. And so I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to this first video. Just a few housekeeping items before I turn the time over to Rachel. As some of you may know, based off of the schedule that was going around, some videos are live. The one that Rachel and I are doing right now, for example, is a live one. And you will be able to submit Q&A once Rachel is done with her time. You can actually submit Q&A at any point during this session, but just realize that it may not be answered until the very end of Rachel's presentation. As well as Q&A, so just make sure you reference that schedule and see which videos may be pre-recorded or not. If it does say talk back, that in other words means Q&A on the schedule. So just keep that in mind, that some sessions are recorded ahead of time. If for some reason you're not able to access every video but would like to be able to get access to the videos, just reach out to our email at mail@icsa.mail.com and I will make sure and get you guys whatever resources you need video-wise. As well, I just have a reminder too, with the Building Bridges series for former cult members and families, I was talking to Pat Ryan a little bit about this today, and next, the schedule, as you can tell, is like a 2-week running schedule, and we're thinking about just having maybe 1 or 2 days after the Building Bridges series is done just for Q&A. So if those of you who are going to be following along with the Building Bridges series, if you just want to be able to ask questions for the next day or so, keep in the loop and just check back in the schedule. It's in a Google Doc, so when we update it, you'll see all the updates. So please just have that handy. So another shout out, I just want to say thank you so much to all those who have signed up. Thank you to our presenters who very quickly offered to help us with this series. And a big thank you to Rachel today and to Pat Ryan. Pat Ryan has graciously coordinated and helped put all this together with me. And so big thank you to Pat Ryan for helping with this series. So without further ado, I will turn the time over to Rachel. And again, if those of you would like to submit Q&A, you can type at any time. We just may not get to it till the very end of the session. So Rachel, whenever you're ready, thank you so much.
Thank you. I am most definitely ready. And I am so happy to be able to be with all of you today. Thank you to everyone who is participating, and thank you to Ashlyn for the introduction and the introduction of this program. It is something that is important for all of us to be talking about, but it's also something I wanted to make sure to make timely because there's so much happening in the world right now, and it didn't feel quite right to just jump over that. So it's woven in to the talk that I'm going to be giving today. I'm going to be looking down a bit because that's where my notes are. And I wanted to be able to talk specifically about recovery now, recovery issues now during a time of crisis. So I know that we are in the middle of a pandemic. And I want you to also know that this kind of message about dealing with recovery issues during a time of crisis is also a generalized message, because there are a lot of times that we go through times of stress or worry or potential danger. Recovery is a challenge for everyone, so this adds some additional challenges and additional strains. And I want to be able to cover what it's like for families and friends of those who have loved ones who are still involved in cultic groups. And also to talk about what it's like for the families and friends of those who have come out of groups and who are trying to recover from that experience and now dealing with all of the stress of what's happening in the world and all of the worries that that creates. And then also to talk about from the perspective of people who have left cults. And also when I refer to cults, I mean relationships as well with narcissists, with controllers, so larger group cults and one-on-one cults. So just so you know, I mean both when I say cult, and what it's like for them to be out, to be dealing with strain and stress and the fear of the unknown. So let's start actually now with what it's like as a family and friend of those who are involved in cults right now. It's extremely difficult even on a good day. And so now it's very worrisome for a lot of families who can't get in touch with their loved ones or can't gain access to them in a way where they can ensure their safety as much as they'd like to be able to ensure their safety. It's nerve-wracking. And so I know that you are additionally worried, and that's to be expected. You want to make sure that they are okay. You want to make sure they're able to act on their own behalf and have the freedom to act on their behalf if something is wrong or if they're having symptoms or if they're nervous. The questions that come up, a lot of families have asked me are they going to have access to medical care? Are they going to be so invested in that kind of magical thinking of the group that that's what they're going to be leaning on during this time, as opposed to getting testing, as opposed to dealing with their symptoms in other sorts of ways? And also, are they going to be living with people who are even going to care about their nervous feelings? Because for so many people, when they're involved in groups that are controlling, you're not supposed to have these kinds of negative feelings. If you're really believing well enough or perfectly enough, everything is supposed to be then taken care of and you have nothing to worry about. But there are a lot of people, as you know, who have left these kinds of groups who, even though in their heart they really wanted to believe that they were beyond worry and beyond concern, they were not. And they were just as equally concerned and worried as people within other environments, not within a cult. You also want to make sure when you have a family member who's involved in a cult or a controlling relationship that they are being allowed to or encouraged to follow safe protocols, which is not always the case. Sometimes it is the case, sometimes not. And are they also being taught that they're immune? That during this time, a lot of people are made to feel that they are ultimately protected. So again, they can feel a little bit more relaxed because they feel like they're protected, but at the same time, in their heart of hearts, again, talking to a lot of former members, they were really wondering, is this something that's going to happen to me? And if it does, am I going to be able to be protected? So that is from the perspective of families who have loved ones still involved in cults. And I know that it is very stressful, and we send our support, and we can advise, or I can advise, that you try to keep as much communication going as possible. And you also make sure that if you do, for some of you, I know you don't have contact, but for the ones who do, you want to be able to make the contact be not that kind of pressured communication. I have to make sure you're okay. I really have to make sure that you're safe. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Because that is something that's going to keep them separate from communicating with you. So if instead it's just a check-in and was just curious how everyone's doing over there, hope your community is doing well, so it's showing that you care about the community, or hope you and your husband or wife, who I hate, no, I'm kidding, hope you and your controlling partner are doing just fine. Of course, if you need anything, just let me know or let us know. And that kind of even a little more relaxed way of approaching it, because that's going to help them not sort of shut down and feel that you are not trusting them and not trusting the situation that they're in. And they're also not going to want that kind of nervous energy, even if that's exactly how you're feeling inside, and you have the right to feel that way inside. So moving on to the next part, which is for the families and friends who have loved ones who have just come out or who have been out for a while of different cults and different kind of controlling and awful relationships. Be aware that while you are, of course, happy that they're away from these groups and controllers, your loved ones may be relieved as well to a certain degree, but also during times of stress, sometimes they're not so relieved. There is this knee-jerk reaction to want to go back to the sense of being protected, of being part of something that gave them this magical sense that everything was going to be okay. And so the fear and the fear swirling around them right now in the world might cause them to feel like they want to go back. It doesn't mean they're going to. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means that there's going to be potentially this very kind of primal push or draw back into a group that they know is not good for them. So you want to weather that storm with them and be with them through that and tell them that you understand why they're feeling that way. And remind them if you can about why they left and also how much safer they have been since they've left. So I want to also be able to talk about how people who have come out, as I've mentioned before in different places, that they're going to be sometimes physically out, but still partially mentally in. And so part of the mentally or spiritually in part is that there's still a bit of the wish for the magical powers to be able to be working, and the pseudoscience, all of the different kind of, cures that are not necessarily medically based. They're really thinking those are going to work, and I need to get those ingredients, or I need to get that kind of crystal, I need to do something, or I need to read that Bible passage, whatever it is, and that's going to keep me safe. And so it's hard to move away from that kind of thinking when you've been trained that it's going to keep you safe. And additionally, I need to get closer to the source of my protection, whether I do it physically or I do it emotionally or I do it spiritually. So that sometimes there is a tuning in to the people in the group, wanting to make sure that you're still connected, that they care about you and you care about them, so that you can then have this sort of blanket of protection that reaches you during this time. And so for families and friends also to realize that that can be present, and that can be something that a lot of people who have left cults grapple with for a long stretch of time, until they realize there are sources of protection outside of the group. This also, having a pandemic can really trigger a validation, unfortunately, of a message that they may have gotten in their group or in their controlling relationship, that the world outside of it is a scary, dangerous place. Well, here they are in the world outside, and it seems scary and dangerous. Truth is, it was just as scary and dangerous inside, but they either didn't feel it or they were not allowed to feel it. And so it will sometimes make the controller, the leader, seem somehow right, that they were right in their message, and that as soon as people leave, something bad is ultimately going to happen to them. If there's anything that you can do to reassure them that they are just as safe now as they were before, probably safer, and they're not in any more danger now than they were before, because a pandemic doesn't actually know where a cult ends and the regular society begins. It will cross over the world in its own way. And in fact, a lot of people I know who have loved ones involved in cultic groups, or who have left cultic groups where they lived in very close quarters, talked about how when there were other pandemics, when there were other viruses that were going around, SARS and others, that they were more at risk, and a lot more people got sick because they were contracting it from each other because they were so close and they didn't follow the same kinds of protocols as other people in the general society. So in fact, people are safer outside. People can also be out and be very suspicious still of Western medicine, of doctors. They can see doctors as being uninformed, unenlightened, not magical, or sometimes even dangerous. And so there might be some resistance in them getting the help that they need. And it's not that they don't care about themselves, it's not that they don't care about their safety, but there is this basic distrust that has permeated their lives now. It's a carryover from the time in the group. So again, you want to kind of go with that and understand that with them, and say you understand where that worry comes from, that you might not share that worry, but you hope one day they're able to get past it so that they can avail themselves of the talents, the available resources in their area for help and prevention. There's also a greater fear of the unknown. So for you to be able to be sensitive about the fact that the people who have come out of cultic relationships or controlling relationships are used to knowing. They're used to having the answer. They're used to knowing what's going to happen and having someone there who can predict it with them. And so there is a genuine discomfort with the unknown, and it's also such an unfamiliar feeling. And again, being able to reach out to them emotionally, verbally, and wonder with them if that's something that's on their mind, that's weighing heavily on them because they're not used to feeling that. And that it's a normal human reaction and it's okay. And to help them address that sometimes we don't know, but we can do all we can so that we can try to navigate our world in the safest way possible with the information we have gotten around us to keep ourselves as safe as possible. The other part is that they might still be making connections between things that aren't connected. This is very, very important. So when people leave these groups where people have really gotten into their heads and they've made them feel that not only if they leave a group will something bad happen to them, but they will also make this connection that somehow if something bad happens to them or happens to someone else, either it's God's will or it's because people weren't believing in the right way, that they caused it to happen to themselves just by not following the life they should have been following. And so your loved ones might seem kind of cold and insensitive to those who are suffering. And it might seem like they only have themselves to blame, these other people who are sick. Again, that's something that is a carryover, and over time it will diminish if you give them an opportunity to talk about it and you help them understand where that idea came from. Because part of the reason that people are taught that within these groups is so that there's a way to kind of explain away everything that happens, especially everything bad that happens. And everything are doing it, or we're doing it, to be able to make a difference, to be able to do good things in this world, to be able to feel like their life has meaning. And so now is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time to be able to get involved in causes, to send money to organizations that are providing resources that people in the medical field need now. Now is a wonderful time to get involved in making sure that you send letters to people who are in convalescent homes, people who are isolated, that you as a family or you as a couple, whatever the kind of grouping is, can find ways to be reminded that your life has meaning, that you can have a sense of meaning outside of the group, but also that there's community. Because one of the things that people, I think, miss the most when they've left groups like this is that they've lost their community. So this is an opportunity to remind them there is a larger community, actually a very large community of the world outside, well, right now people are kind of relying on each other and hoping to be able to find ways, and multiple ways, to reach out and be reminded that they're part of a larger community. And the lesson that that teaches is that they don't have to just be a part of a cult in order to have a sense of community, a sense of meaning, a sense of belonging, and a sense of purpose. And so the third group that I want to be talking to and talking about, and this is also something important for the loved ones to listen to, because I think it's important insight for you to have, is that it's, of course, a very hard time for people who have left cultic groups. So the people who are the former members or former partners themselves, I think they're not used to, and a lot of you, if you're listening, you're not used to feeling like you have the ability or even the option to take action on your own behalf. There was usually kind of a stalling of that you would wait and see what the leader would tell you to do, or what your partner gave you permission to do. And you would be guided on the next best thing that you could do for your health and for your safety based on what someone else told you you could do. And that instills a certain kind of passivity, which can become habitual. And so I think that, you know, I can go into a lot of ways to approach that, which I will in a second, but it reminds me of higher power, if that's your belief, and not just being passive and deferring to a higher power. Some of you listening, and for some of your loved ones, they are atheists, agnostic, they believe in God. This doesn't matter. The message is in being someone who works on your own behalf. And so the message is a kind of sometimes called the lifeboat story, or the story of the lifeboat and the flood. And so there's a story of a man who is experiencing a flood in his town. And he notices as the water is rising that he starts to pray to God to save him. And the water just keeps rising and rising. And a person comes by in a little dinghy, a little boat, and says, come on in, come on in. I want to help you be able. So there are many other attempts from other people to save him, and he says no. So suddenly he finds himself in front of God, realizing that he has drowned and he has died. And he said, God, I've always been such a good person. Why didn't you save me? And God said, I sent someone in a lifeboat. I sent someone in a helicopter, but you didn't get on the ladder. You didn't get on the boat. So here you are. And so it's this idea of working together, that you don't just want to wait and hope, but you want to take action. And it doesn't mean that you are non-believing, and it doesn't mean that somehow you deserve punishment. It doesn't mean a lot of things. It just means that you're the one who also needs to participate in your own well-being. The other thing that I wanted to be able to mention too is that a lot of people leaving these kinds of situations will sometimes feel selfish taking care of themselves. That if they take care of themselves, if they use up resources that could have been used for someone else who may have been sicker, that they're going to feel guilty. They're going to feel like they've done something wrong in whatever, in God's eyes, anyone else's eyes. And they're not deserving of health, and also that they need to be deferential and think about everyone else. And so people sometimes will not go to get the help they want, because they do feel like somehow it's being too selfish, and they feel very guilty about that. It's also very hard too to move out of this idea of having sort of magical protection, as we talked about before. And you can still find yourself drawn to these magical cures and magical forms of protection. And unfortunately now on the news and online, there are millions and millions of people who are touting all of these cures and all of these protections. And I hope that everyone is ignoring all of them, because for a lot of people, pandemics are opportunities. They're opportunities to make a living, and they're opportunities to get a following. And so you want to listen only to medical professionals at this point. And I know it's hard because it doesn't feel very magical. The other part is that people sometimes leave blaming themselves if they get sick. So if they start having symptoms, if they feel like the coronavirus somehow affects or infects them, that they brought it in, as a particular cult says, or they brought it to them, or they deserved it in some way. And there are other former cult members who will feel like they brought on the pandemic themselves because they left. And because that was one of the things that the cult leader said, that if you leave, you're going to wreak havoc in this world. You're going to cause bad things to happen. So they actually feel responsible for everybody else getting sick. The other part is that sometimes you won't get a read on someone who has left a cult and how they're really feeling, because they've learned to hide their harder feelings, their fears, their sadness, their worry. And so just know that if you are the one who has left and you've learned to have this sort of cult persona, this stoic kind of countenance, that's okay, except then you're not going to get somebody who is with you asking if you're okay or knowing that you're not okay. And it's important to be able to really express how you're feeling now, especially if you're having symptoms. And don't hide them because you're thinking your symptoms are a sign of your weakness. It's a time to be able to really, again, take care of yourself and reach out and tell people how you're feeling, and also emotionally what you're needing. You don't have to suffer through this alone. The other part is that a lot of people leave and are involved in conspiracy theories and a general mistrust of the world, a mistrust of the government. And so with the way the government is handling this, there have been some good ways and there have been some bad ways. And so with the bad ways, of course, that's going to underscore this general distrust of the government and more of a sense of alignment with a lot of the conspiracy theories. So be cautious about that, because that will take you down a rabbit hole. There are a never-ending stream of conspiracy theories, and you don't want to add more things to worry about or more reasons to distrust the powers that be than you already have. Not only, though, is it a hard time for former cult members, it's also a good time. And what I mean by that is not that it's a really good time, it's that a lot of former cult members have said to me recently that now they feel they're able to actually make a doctor's appointment when they weren't allowed medical care before. They're actually able to take their symptoms seriously and not explain it away that it wasn't because they read the right Bible passage, or it wasn't because they showed enough self-sacrificial behavior and that's why they're having symptoms. That they can also have their feelings taken seriously and normalized and generalized. Like, yeah, that's okay to be feeling this way. It's okay to be crying. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be scared, and it's okay to show it, because that's what people do. And there's nothing wrong with you. And it's also a way for people around you to, again, be more sensitive to what you need. It's also a way right now for a lot of people, when they're hearing these stories of people reaching out and taking care of those who are not able to care for themselves right now, and reaching out to people who are isolated, that it is reminding them that the world is a community, that they didn't just leave the one community they could have ever been a part of, and now they're in this sort of vast kind of isolationist space, that they are part of a greater community. And at these times, we have a sense of that. And we have a sense of it also if we create it, and a lot of people are creating it. So I wanted to also mention, as I'm finishing up, that while I do a weekly podcast called IndoctriNation, and I have people on, as some of you know, who have been involved in cultic groups or have been involved in relationships with narcissists, etc. Last week, this coming week, and the week after is going to be all about what's happening now in the world. And last week was talking to a person who works at a food co-op market and dealing with the public. This week will be about people in the medical community, talking to doctors and nurses and what it's like for them. And the following week will be about students of all ages, and how this time has been for them as schools have shut down. And so please feel free to check it out. And you can always email me too at bernsteinlmft@gmail.com if you want to be in touch, or call me 818-907-0036. I'm working remotely on the phone, on the computer. But I also want to do a special thanks to ICSA, which is so wonderful at filling a need, because a lot of people are feeling really disconnected and really isolated. And so thank you to Ashlyn and Pat Ryan and Michael Langoni and all the people who are involved in making this happen. I hope that you all stay healthy, and I hope that you all stay safe, and I hope that you all stay connected and listen only to really reputable sources for accurate and up-to-date information, please, please, please. And if you or someone you know is not well, I hope they are getting the help that they need, and I wish you or your loved one a full recovery. Take good care.
Thank you, Rachel, so much. Do you have some time for Q&A? I noticed we had some questions that came in.
Oh, sure, great. Mm-hmm.
One of the questions was, what do you think the current pandemic of online cult streaming can reveal to cult survivors, or those currently questioning the ethics and credibility of their leader? What are some useful ways for cult survivors to physically distance themselves when abusive leaders are moving to spread their influence online? So this is more so in the context of online recruiting. And, you know, especially like you mentioned, there's a lot of, you know, fake news going around. There's all kinds of pseudo cures, and you know, online is a constant median for cult recruiters.
Mm-hmm.
So
right, yes. And so how do you stay away from that? I mean, you can't necessarily stay away from all of it. And in fact, I'm guilty of checking it out only because I find it so fascinating to see what kind of techniques they're using. And I think, yeah, if someone says that they know more about medicine than, you know, any doctor, and they can help to cure you, and you find that they're sort of backlit and their hair is kind of going in the wind, and they, you know, are fully done with makeup for the camera, they're probably not the medical professional you need to be talking to. I think that what you want to do, if you're going to be looking at those things, or if you feel like your loved ones are going to be checking them out, you want to be doing something that I think is really smart, which is using it as an opportunity to hone in on your critical thinking and also in the techniques of influence. And so if you can print out a page from Robert Cialdini's book that has the techniques of influence and have them in front of you if you do want to watch a video, or if your loved one needs to watch a video, and have them check off all of the techniques of influence as they're seeing them, and how you can only get this cure here, and we're the ones who can help you, and so if we can cure you, what are you going to do for us? The idea of reciprocity. You will see it all there, and if you can use it as a teaching tool, then use it as a teaching tool. But there are so many sources of information that are not as glossy, and sometimes people are used to checking in with the people who are familiar to them. And so you want to offer them links and websites for them to check out. Give them places, if they do want to go online, that are reputable, and then see if they can notice the difference. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for that. We just have a few more questions here. How can someone, I think this is a great question, how can someone recovering from a cult overcome the fear of running into people who are still in the cult?
Oh, that's a, yes.
Great question.
All of these are great questions, but I just want to say that's one that I'm asked a lot, and a lot of people are very scared of that. So I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is, if you don't feel like you're ready for it, then it's okay to avoid going down that street where the place is, or driving down, you know, past the center or whatever else. That's okay for a while if you need to do that. But I don't want the group to dictate how much freedom you have and freedom of movement. And so eventually you want to be able to try to venture out, even if it means going to the same market or the same campus or whatever else, as the people who were involved in the cult are going to be still congregating. And so a couple thoughts. One is, you want to be able to have something prepared. So think about what you want to say when you're asked a lot of questions. How are you doing? These are all going to be leading questions. They're going to be trying to find out how your life is. And they're going to try to convince you to come back, if that's what they're there for. Group they go right into often feeling like the other person is going to be in charge of that conversation, and you have to answer every question they ask. And as I've said many times to my clients, just because you're asked a question doesn't mean you need to answer it. So if someone asks you a question, you can say, oh, that's a really interesting question. Anyway, and just change the subject. But remember, you have just as much control over that conversation as they do, but you actually have a bit more because they want something from you and you don't want it from them. So you can keep moving, but have a little script prepared that just talks about what you want to say, have it be short, and you end the conversation. But also know that you're going to be speaking volumes, even if you don't say a word, just by seeming happy and healthy. Because what you're saying is, that exists on the other side. I'm okay. In fact, I might be actually a little better. And so you actually don't have to say anything verbally, because you're saying it so much just physically.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was such a good question. Thank you. So another question we have that's come in. I wanted to start a support group in my area because I struggle severely with relationships. I have no friends and I have trouble with churches too. How to start a support group for ex-cult members in my area. This person is located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Any advice you can give on starting up a meetup of any kind, Rachel?
Yes. Okay, so first of all, yes, please do that. It's very important. There are very few places for people to meet and for people to really understand each other. A lot of people I know who attend the support group that I have in my office have said that they went to support groups for domestic violence, and they went to support groups for other, wonderful groups. But it was it sort of dealt with what they were, dealing with, but also kind of missed the mark. Because it wasn't necessarily about culture, it wasn't about spiritual abuse. And so if you start a support group, what you want to do is you want to be able to find out about how, if you're going to be leading it, either how to run a support group. There are a lot of videos just in general about how to run a support group, and so educate yourself about that. Or you can get someone to facilitate it who's had more experience with running support groups. You also want to have a safeguard in place. And something that I do is that I talk to people beforehand. So it's not just a drop-in, because a lot of people who attend these groups are nervous about who's going to suddenly show up at the door. And I've had experience with people who have come and they weren't there for the right reasons, I'll just say. And so I will let them know I want to have a conversation with them first to make sure it's the right fit. And if they don't want to have that conversation, then I know that it was the wrong fit. But if they do want to have the conversation, at least I can assure everyone in the room that I've had a chance to talk to you all before. So I've vetted the group as much as possible to make sure it's going to be safe, or as safe as possible. And then to also be able to address how much people who are walking into that space are going to be scared of that space. They're going to be scared of sitting in a circle, having to talk to people face to face, because the last time they did that, they were put on the hot seat and they were made to sit in that chair for 8 hours. Let them know that they are free to come and go as they please. They can get up and get a drink of water. They can go to the bathroom. They can leave if they need to. They can also not show up, and it's okay. That there are all these freedoms in place, and that also you want to give people permission to not speak. because when people come in, sometimes they're really afraid of telling their story, and they first want to just observe, and they want to see how someone else tells their story, and they want to see how you respond to it to make sure it's going to be safe for them. So make it okay, even when you're going around and having people introduce themselves, that someone can say, I'll pass for this week. And that just absolutely needs to be okay. There are many more ideas. And in fact, once a year I do this, I am a guest lecturer at this class at USC where I teach exactly this, how you do a support group for people who have had group experiences that were abusive or highly controlled. So we can talk more.
Thank you. I just want to say real quickly how good of sports everyone's been. I mean, with like Wi-Fi pausing, my cat jumped on my lap and someone messaged, more cat, love the cat. I love, thank you guys, you know, with the work from home situations due to this virus, you know, I really appreciate everyone sticking in there and having a great attitude about it. It means a lot to Rachel and I.
Yes. A lot. And my clients have been very forgiving of my snoring dog, I have to say. So
I heard your snoring dog once and I was like, oh, that's definitely the dog, not Rachel, definitely the dog.
Of course, and he's the one who wants to be closest to me, right? You know,
yes,
and he's, yes, very loud. Sorry.
Yes, I love it. Well, and I just had a message too, if anyone's in the UK, the Family Survival Trust has a psychoeducational support group in London and Manchester. They've got online and hope in due time to open to participants from further afield. They have a Facebook group and event listings if anyone wants to be able to check that out. And I'll post that, I'll share that on our Facebook page as well, the ICSA page. It's a great reminder. Thank you for that. Could you repeat your email one more time, Rachel? Someone's asking for your contact info.
Sure, and it can be posted through ICSA as well. My contact info, Bernstein, so that's my last name, Bernstein, and then the initials LMF as in Frank T, it's my license, at Gmail. And you can also call me, 818-907-0036. There's also a Gmail account through the show, IndoctriNation show at gmail.com. A lot of ways to reach me, smoke signals, whatever. Yeah, I'm sure that Ashlyn and others will post contact information.
Yes, I will. And it will also, on the schedule, all the presenter bios and contact information are at the very bottom of the schedule that everyone has access to. Just one more question. I think this may be our last question. Maybe not. I'm getting a few more messages. We'll see. One of the questions is, what are good indicators that a person is moving on from the influences of a former cult situation in a healthy manner? So good indications that they've come out of that a little bit more.
Okay. So one of the first good indicators that I think people don't realize is actually a huge indicator is laughter. When people come out of these situations, they've come out of a situation where things were always so serious and everything mattered so much. And so to have someone be able to smile and to laugh and to be able to enjoy themselves is a huge indicator. So that's first. Second, being able to have some downtime and be okay with it, because there is the hamster wheel and you're always behind, and there's the mission and what God wants from you, or what the person controlling you needs to be able to see in terms of how much you're going to sacrifice every minute of your day and every hour of sleep you could get. And so if someone is able to just sit and do nothing for a period of time, or just watch TV, or just read a book that is not written by the cult leader, then already that shows that they're able to kind of separate themselves from that pressured kind of adrenaline rush that they're in all the time. And they have learned to be able to sort of make themselves an appointment, take care of what they need, and address that. The other thing is being able to have some distance from it, where people start to have a greater understanding, like being able to see maybe that people in the group were kind of up to something, or the leader was up to something, and being able to have more anger about it. Now, not that I want people to be walking through the world being angry, but there is a lot of fear of being angry at the leader while you're in it, and still residual fear once you get out. But if people get to be kind of rightfully pissed off for a period of time, that also is showing some distance. And reaching out to other people, reaching out to friends that they had had before, or new friends that they want to make, setting up their new community. There are a lot of important signs.
Mm-hmm. You talked a lot about in the beginning how maintaining contact is extremely important with people in these groups. Just finding ways to check in, let them know you're there. But someone asked a question, what about families who have no contact, zero contact? What do you do in that instance during this really stressful time?
Right. So, you know, I certainly, I feel for all of them. I mean, that's hard in any situation. There are people who have children who are missing. There are people who, they have kids now who are in other countries where they can't reach them. There are a lot of people who are now out of contact. But for someone who is dealing with a loved one being in a controlled environment or a cultic environment where they have no contact at all, what you try to do is you try to do a couple of things. One is see if there is any way, and this is sort of thinking about it in terms of potential intervention steps, see if there's anyone else who can make contact. See if there's anyone else who can check on that person who's not you, if they don't necessarily feel they want to have contact with you or they're not allowed to have contact with you. If there's anyone who can go and check on them, or can be even hired to go and just show up at the group or the compound or the wherever it is, and see if they can get a sense if they're okay, if they're alive and they're well or well-ish. And I think the other thing to do, and some people hire private investigators to try to find their kids, or at least to have someone take pictures to make sure that they're okay and they're still around. There are a lot of ideas and a lot of things that we can go over. But I think also when I was talking about how when people leave cultic groups and they feel selfish taking care of themselves at times, loved ones have the same thing, that if they love someone who they don't have contact with, who they're worried about, they don't take care of themselves because they're so racked with worry. And so they don't ever put their phone down, and they don't really sleep fitfully, and they don't leave their house because what if that's the day that their loved one comes home, and they put their lives on hold. So to know that it's not selfish for you to take care of yourself during this time, because if and when your loved one comes back, you want to be able to enjoy it, and you want to be healthy enough to enjoy it. Or if it's time to do any kind of an intervention, that takes a lot of energy and momentum that you have to kind of get in yourself, and you can't if you're completely depleted. You also want to get support for yourself. Talk to other parents, talk to professionals who have a sense of understanding what you're going through, and then do what makes you feel like you are connecting with them. And if it's to hold on to something that belongs to them, or send a prayer their way, or whatever speaks for you and your psyche and within your spiritual realm, now's the time to do it, and to hope that they're well. And I'm sorry you're in that situation.
Just a few more questions because our time is drawing to a close here. One of them was submitted, and what if you were having a difficult time getting in touch with your feelings? You know, and that could be due to a lot of factors. What advice do you recommend for that?
So when you're having trouble getting in touch with your feelings, yes, there are people who are more comfortable with that. They have more access to their feelings. They were raised in environments where there was a lot of talk about feelings. There was the language used of feelings, being able to express how you feel emotionally. But if that wasn't your upbringing, or you had it, but it was taken away within the cult, and you just had to be this sort of automaton cyborg cult persona, then sometimes the feelings are not going to register as much as something physiological is going to register. So you might get a tightening in your shoulders that you realize means stress, and then you give it a word. Or you might get kind of tears in your eyes, and if before you have them go away, before you distract yourself, think, why did I just get tears in my eyes? And tears can be from sadness, tears can be from frustration, tears can be from anger, tears can be from a lot of reasons. If you get a tightening in your stomach or an acidy stomach or anywhere in your body, think, okay, I'm having a feeling. That's something that was created by my brain. It released a chemical in my system that's causing my body to react a certain way, but it came from an emotion usually. If everything was the same and you hadn't just eaten something bad and that's not why your stomach is hurting, but it suddenly is just feeling bad, then think, what just happened to me? And how might someone else feel in that kind of situation?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of feelings would be typical for that kind of situation? And then access the language of feelings and just go onto websites that are about feelings. This is what a feeling is called. This is why a lot of people have it. But none of that is going to work if you feel there's something wrong with having feelings, or you're worried about having feelings because it's going to make you feel vulnerable because they were taken advantage of before and weaponized and used against you. So you need to feel safe having them and safe expressing them. Then you can do all that I just mentioned. So you need to do it in that order.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. My cult leader made an example of me and humiliated me in front of my whole church. Ever since, I've had a strong sense of individuality and skepticism of groups. Someone's asking, how do I find trust in a community again?
Yeah. Okay. So first, you want to trust yourself. Meaning, if that happens again, you're going to say something. And if that happens again, you have the freedom to go. And if that happens again and someone is getting up and shaming you, then they're probably also scaring other people in the room. So you are not the only one in that space who's experiencing a negative response to what's happening. And you want to remember that, because within a cult, you can feel very isolated. Everyone else is sort of playing along that they're fine with everything because they know they need to, because they don't want to be the next person on the hot seat. But you just know that if someone is mistreating you, they're probably making almost everyone else in the room uncomfortable too. And so if you trust yourself to act on your own behalf, if anything like that happens, then you won't be as nervous about going into group experiences because you'll know you'll protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have the freedom to. It's not that you couldn't before, you weren't really, it wasn't safe to. But what you want to do is you want to be able to know that if you have a response that's a negative response, you get to say something about it and say, you know, the way you talked to me, that didn't make me feel very good, or that really wasn't cool, or let's find a different way of talking to each other. And you have a way of expressing yourself and see how that's dealt with. Sometimes you can't tell how healthy a group is until you kind of speak up for yourself and you state what's on your mind and see how that's responded to. And so if it's responded to in a way where people are respecting your opinion and they're thanking you for bringing it up and for making them aware, then it's a safer group. The other part is that if you find that you get involved in a group where you are supposed to be donating so much time and devotion to the group, but to the expense of everything else, that's a time to leave. If it's a group where the followers or the people involved in the group have to share so many personal things about themselves where it seems almost kind of uncomfortable and not necessary for people to know all that private information about you, that's also time to leave. Especially in those groups, the leader's not going to share anything about themselves, but you have to share everything about you. Wherever there is that dichotomy, you want to leave. And also when you're made to feel like whatever you're doing or however much time you spend is never enough, you also want to leave. So there are these sort of red flags that are really important to watch out for. But know that if you've had a bad experience, when you walk into a group, you're gonna be uncomfortable. It doesn't mean it's unhealthy yet. You haven't gotten the evidence yet. You're just carrying that over from your past experience. So get the evidence and then act on the evidence.
I feel like this has been like a lightning round of questions, and I love it. Thank you, everyone who submitted questions. This is seriously our last question, just because I think we're out of time. I keep saying that, and then they keep coming, and I'm like, oh, these are so good. I have to communicate them to Rachel. Thank you, Rachel, for helping with this lightning round of questions. And
Anytime.
we have 39 participants who are tuned in, which is
awesome.
Amazing.
Love it.
So last question, let's see here. Being in touch with family members who are in the cult feels very disturbing. Witnessing how they psychologically treat themselves feels like I'm witnessing someone self-harming, as if they want me to be complicit in that. Any advice? I think it's a great question.
So your family who's still involved in a group and you are not, right? Did I hear the beginning correctly?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Family's involved in a group, they're not, but yet they're wanting to maintain communication, as far as I understand.
Yeah. So well said, because yes, there is this sort of self-flagellation that you see, and you want to be able to help them escape from that. That's not necessary. It shouldn't be necessary in life for people to be torturing themselves in that way and have themselves or let themselves be tortured just because they are belonging to a particular group or a philosophy or a theology. Being complicit is an interesting idea, because what you're doing is you're saying, in order for me to maintain communication, I need to kind of go along with this. And I need to turn a blind eye, at least, in public or with them, to what's happening. But what you hope is that if you keep that communication going, what you want to do is not feel that you're being passively complicit, but you're being strategically connected. And so if you are then strategically connected, it means that you have them know that they can have a safe conversation with you, where you're not going to be criticizing what they're doing. But what you want to do is not miss opportunities to point things out. And you do it in subtle ways by just wondering if the person who seems to be really hard on themselves, really needs to be that hard on themselves, or say, it's really a shame that you feel that way about what you did or you didn't do, because I think you're wonderful. And I really hope that you're with people now who help you feel that way too. These are these moments where you can help them see that they don't have to be living this tortured life. And so, again, we can talk about ways to make those kinds of inroads. But I don't want, of course, if you feel like their life is in danger or they're being tremendously abused, then you might want to jump in a different way and not just wait and not just, have this sort of strategic way of eventually having a conversation. But it's just, if they're living a life where it's not as joyful as it could be, and it's much harsher and harder than it needs to be, keep the communication going and find ways to help them know and help be reminded that life doesn't have to be so hard, and also that you see their goodness and you see what could be in the world for them and the happiness that they could be having, and that you can wish it for them, and also sometimes provide it for them. Again, help them laugh, help them have a good time, help them have those kinds of emotions that take them out of that very kind of serious and sometimes sad way of being.
All right, we've ended at 6:01, almost on the dot. So thank you so much, Rachel, for contributing. It was great. And it was just such a great way to kick off our series too. Just a reminder for everyone who's tuning in, if you didn't hear my introduction, please notice on the schedule, some talks are pre-recorded while others are live. Not every talk will have Q&A available at the end, but if you have any questions at any time, if Q&A may not necessarily be available, send us an email at mail@icsaMail.com, and we can send that off to experts. We can help come up with something for you guys to help answer your questions. So we just so appreciate everyone. Please spread the word for this free series. It will be ongoing, and thank you so much, everybody. Thank you again, Rachel.
My pleasure.
Stay safe.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you all.